This is not a smart video to make. Probably not at all. Probably I feel like a lot of people will be mad at me, but I have a lot of thoughts and I want to be true to them. So this video is about the concept of LARPing, being a genwunner, being a tourist, or whatever words the Pokemon community wants to use today to find ways to define your Pokemon fandom as not as pure of heart as theirs, which is my problem. So first, we're going to talk about the concept of genwunners, then we're going to talk about LARPers, and then kind of tourists all together, and why I think we need to chill the out. So first, what is a genwunner? So a genwunner is a pejorative term usually used by newer Pokemon fans to make fun of older Pokemon fans who love Gen 1. And in this video, I'm going to explain, not defend, explain the genwunner mindset. I am not one, don't worry. But why we're a little too accusatory of what it means to be a genwunner. Second, everyone now calls other people larpers. If you don't know a specific fact about this one specific game, you're a larper, you're a tourist, you've never liked Pokemon before ever. And this purity test thing that we got going on in the Pokemon community does not pass the vibe check. The Nazis would love your purity test, so would the KKK. If you're aligning with them, probably you're messing up somewhere. But anyway, let's talk about this phenomenon. So genwunners, basically the concept is that genwunners, all they care about is Gen 1, that anything beyond Gen 1 is fake Pokemon and it's all not real and blah, 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 blah. And I know people like this in my real life. I'm 33. I grew up when I was, young, watching Pokemon and all these sorts of things. I want to explain the mindset of a genwunner. So maybe you can be a little bit more thoughtful, kind. I don't know. Like, here's the thing. We're all fans of the same thing. So why are we so mad about how other people are fans of the same thing? So first, the genwunner experience. I want to talk about kind of the Pokemon experience from being a kid to now, because I think that's really important to understand. First thing you need to understand, all of us have a cognitive bias where we are nostalgic for the first thing that we connected to an activity for. I almost guarantee you and bet most of you money your favorite Pokemon is from the first game you played. Doesn't matter what generation, good chance it's from the first game you played. Not 100%, but there's a good chance of that because we all have nostalgia biases. The problem is Pokemon has been around for 30 years, so all of our nostalgia biases are different. So, oh, you don't remember that thing? Well, you're wrong. But here's the thing about Gen 1ers, or people who've been in Pokemon for a long time, is that we watch Pokemon go from this non-existent thing to this thing which we thought might be a fad, to like there were more Pokemon, to all of a sudden we're 9 generations deep, and a lot of people my age who maybe stopped playing Pokemon in their teens or 20s, and we'll talk about that timeline a little bit more, all of a sudden come back and there's like 600, 800 new Pokemon, but the Pokemon they've known for like their whole life are like not like are being judged or being made fun of and things like that. So let's go back to the timeline. So in the late, 1999, 1998, finally the United States and other places, we start getting Pokemon. We can play it on Game Boy. And the thing that you really need to understand about this conversation is the concept of what I would consider asymmetrical information. Nowadays, that if you want information about anything, you just search it up, you get it. But back when I was 5 playing Pokemon, Blue, the only way I found out things was if your family bought like the game thing, which was expensive, and not everyone did that. There weren't like online sources like there are now. Yeah, sure there are, but there were, but they weren't as popular. And so people didn't know things as ubiquitously in the Pokemon community as they do now. Now everyone knows that there's all these shinies, that there's the physical special. In Gen 1, we didn't know any of that stuff. Also, in Gen 1, a lot of that stuff didn't exist, right? There wasn't the physical special split. There were 15 types when we started. There wasn't shinies, and there weren't abilities. There weren't these other things. And I want to be clear, I'm very happy that Pokemon has added all of these things. But if your first interaction with a franchise is this particular way, and you play that game for years in that particular way, that becomes your bright line of the things that you know. I argued with someone recently online where I played gold and didn't realize that Gyarados, the shiny Gyarados, was like a shiny. And I was called a larper. Like, we all know it was shiny. No, we didn't. I just thought it was a special Gyarados because it had never existed before. The concept of a shiny was new. How would I, at 7, know that every single Pokemon had a new shiny form? I didn't. And many of us didn't. Even my friends who played back then, I show them my shiny Pokemon now, and they're like, wait, there's shinies? And you may say, oh, well, I'm a LARPer, they're a LARPer, but all of our Pokemon fandom was legit and is legit. Now, I want to get into kind of the timeline of the Gen 1, or at least American experience, and maybe this will help you understand why it seems like there's a lot more Gen 1ers when there actually aren't. So, first, a lot of people who were my age when we started playing Pokemon, we were young. We were dependent on our parents to take us to watch the movies, right? We were watching the anime on TV. We were doing these all sorts of things. And I want to be clear, this was groundbreaking at the time. At the time, anime was seen as like this weird thing. Like you were the weird kid running like Naruto, or like the only like popular anime, like not popular, but like, if you were like a 7-year-old boy, you loved Dragon Ball Z, you were good. And Pokemon was one of the few things that kind of broke the barrier for everyone. Everyone in America could watch Pokemon, no one judged. And everyone was talking about it. My friends would talk about it on the playground. Like it was part of like this social capital, it was part of conversations that were happening daily, right? Pokemon became this like ubiquitous thing that everyone knew. Even my parents, knew about Pokemon a little bit. My mom took me to the first movie, and she was very confused as I was sobbing my eyes out as Ash turned to stone, but she took me. And the reason that this matters, this part of this conversation, is a lot of the early Pokemon community was your friends, was the people around you, was those sorts of things. And those are like the memories we have. Those are the deep things that we entrench in the Pokemon. When my friends think about Pokemon, they probably think about when we were opening packs when we were 7, like on the playground. They don't think about, Gen 9 Sneasler, which is wrong because I love Gen 9 Sneasler. But the point being is that you had an entire generation of kids who played these games. The other thing that made it complicated is that when Gen 2 came out, the concept of a generation did not exist, right? When Gen 2 came out, first, we had seen some of the Gen 2 Pokemon already. Donphan was in the Pokemon movie. Ho-Ho was in the first episode of the anime. And so when the second generation of Pokemon came out, a lot of people in my generation, I bet, would bet money, don't view that as Gen 1 or Gen 2. They view it as Gen 1 because they view it as a continuation, as sort of the next step in Pokemon. But there wasn't this idea that there was going to be generations, that this was the thing that was continuing. Keep in mind, as I mentioned, people thought it was a fad. We just came out of like the Beanie Baby era, and so it was like, oh, sure, your Pokemon card's gonna be worth something someday. Okay, little Bobby, you're wrong. I was right, Mom. Why? We should have got more Pokemon cards back in the day. More! But the point being is that the way we view Pokemon was not this like, oh, there's this generation, this generation, this generation. It was like, here are the Pokemon I know, and we found more Pokemon. Isn't that really cool? Right? And so you could have enjoyed Pokemon earnestly as a kid, my age, from the times of like 5 to 12, and only play the Gen 1 and the Gen 2 games and not realize that they were different generations. And you might say, well, that's so stupid. But that's the thing, we didn't know because of this whole point I was talking about before of asymmetrical information. This wasn't ubiquitous. There weren't YouTubers talking about this. There wasn't TikToks explaining blah, 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 right? It was all like schoolyard stuff. I mean, like, I believe till I was 12 that in Smash 64 that Goldeen could one-shot you periodically because my friend told me that as a kid. And other people told me that too. And we all assumed it was true, right? We were spreading fake news, but we didn't know it was fake news because we didn't know how to check, right? Or we would have like one system. And I think you also need to understand that this generation, as we started aging, that it changed our relationship with how Pokemon worked. Because all of a sudden it went from like, hey, let me just get this cartridge for my Game Boy. Now all of a sudden it's Generation 3, and I need to get a Game Boy Advance, and I need to do this thing. And I think Americans started feeling like, parents especially, like, oh, this is a cash grab, right? You're just making more things to make more things. And you might say, well, duh, isn't that what everyone does? But at the time, that was still new, right? Like there weren't like you have franchises, but you don't have these like we're adding 100 monsters every single time, right? That was still a brand new concept. So you could have enjoyed Pokemon from like 1993, or sorry, 1996, 1997, 1990 to 2002, 2003, and never interact with anything beyond Gen 2, and that's all you know and love. And you're gonna tell someone that they don't like something that they did for 6 or 7 years of their life. But I think another factor that might seem weird to bring up, but something to consider is the gaming culture. Again, I'm talking about America specifically. I can't speak to other places. But 9/11 happened. I mentioned 9/11, and then my camera froze like this for 10 minutes. Like being cool to liking Pokemon to what everyone was talking about to like, hey, you need. So this is my second recording. And Bush, I'm so sorry. Please don't hurt me. But obviously, 9/11 happened and bad transitions was standing. The reason that I'm bringing it up is not because it really changed sales. In fact, Pokemon sales continued to rise after that. But gaming culture in America changed quite a bit. I can tell you as a young boy, it went from cool to liking Pokemon to like, hey, Bobby, have you heard of this thing called Halo? Call of Duty? That might be pretty good to play. And this entire generation of boys was really kind of pushed into these war, kind of violent kind of games, and I think you had an entire generation of kids that then were kind of scared to play Pokemon or talk about Pokemon. Keep in mind, like back then, still everything was like they weren't really online communities like there are now. So you really only had your friends. So if your friends stopped playing the games, it kind of left you in this weird spot where you had to choose to socially isolate yourself, which I wish now I would have do things not because they're cool but because I wanted to, or kind of go with the crowd. And so this led to a generation of kids who were kind of pushed into different games. From the time I was in middle school to the time I was in college, a lot of us were pushed into different games and we couldn't necessarily buy our own games, right? Keep in mind, like, we're young, we didn't have a disposable income, so our parents had to approve the things that we were buying. So if our parents had any weird xenophobic things or anything like that, we couldn't out just do that, right? Like, I think an important thing to keep in mind is like parents were really big gatekeepers for a lot of these things, right? Even when I was a kid, if I wanted to go online to look up a fact about Pokemon, I'd have to kick my dad off his corn watching machine and make sure that I could use it because we'd only have one family computer. Also, Dad, why are you watching corn on the family computer? On top of that, you're asking me to turn the phone off because we only had dial up to search up a Pokemon fact online? No, those things weren't going to happen. And the reason I bring up all this is that gaming changed a little bit. The new generation of younger kids started playing the new Pokemon games, and people of my generation, we still liked it, but we didn't really play it. We didn't really talk about it as much, and we didn't necessarily have the disposable income. We weren't going to buy a new gaming system. I think another thing to keep in mind is when Gen 3 came out, our parents were looking back at the Beanie Baby fad and going, wait, is this just a cash grab? And I could tell a lot of parents really started after Gen 3 changing their vibe, right? Pokemon became this cash grab. It wasn't just like a new series, it was intentionally there to make money. And that felt weird for a lot of American parents, at least. I know it did for my family. So we weren't buying cards. Now to play the game, I had to get like a Game Boy Advance, right? I had to get a new system, and all those things add money. And so over time, you have people falling out of the community for a little bit because that's kind of how gaming went. But new generations of Pokemon fans come in, they play the new games, and that's their new favorite. And this is also why I think the generation like 5 and 6 games become really popular again with like my age generation because a lot of us come back to Pokemon in those games. I didn't come back till Gen 7 with Sun and Moon, but that's when I have my own disposable income. I don't have to worry about my own parents' beliefs about anime or Pokemon. I can buy my own things. I'm no longer in school. I might have more disposable time or income because I'm in college and things like that. And the point being is, I want you to imagine someone like me who's born whatever age I am, 33, and I play Pokemon for 6 or 7 years. I enjoy it. And then I don't really play it for like a decade or so because life happens. I'm going to college, I'm becoming an adult. And then the next big Pokemon thing happens. Pokemon Go to the polls. And Everyone loses their mind. Everyone's playing Pokemon again. World peace is achieved. And once again, people of my generation are doing what? Playing Generation 1. And here's the core of this whole conversation, I think, for Gen 1. I'm going to summarize it right now. The Gen 1er issue is a Pokemon marketing issue. This Venusaur shirt I'm wearing, while I do like it, it's because it was one of the few button ups at GameStop. Pokemon Go was popular and brought people back into the game and only had Gen 1. And Pokemon Company saw this and was like, let's make a Switch game that people like. Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. And now you have people like me who suddenly have a disposable income buying a Switch, buying their first game, playing on the phone. And again, if you played Pokemon Go for the first year, there was no like Gen 2 content really till the end of that year. And then you play Pokemon Go like Eevee and Pikachu. Let's Go on Switch. Now you play Pokemon for 10, 12, 13 years and have never touched anything beyond generation 2. Again, like I mentioned, an important thing to understand is like these were all the same, like to us, the same generation, right? Gen 1, Gen 2, it was all the same. And so I think a lot of this is a branding issue. And we need to kind of get off of our high horse when it comes to purity and who blah blah blah. It's like, oh, your favorite band is blah blah blah. What's the drummer's brother's name? Like, who cares? We need to stop getting performatively angry about stuff that doesn't matter. We are all in the same community. I think it's so cool that I can talk to my boss about Pokemon. She's literally my principal at my school is my friend on Pokemon Go. And then I can talk to my students and play against them on Showdown during nutrition. Like, what other activity do we get to have something so big, so beautiful, so ubiquitous? But because of asymmetrical information and how long time has passed, we view each other as sort of like this other. When we're in the same community, we're supporting the same thing. It's also rare to have an activity or a fandom that spans multi generations, like in the way that Pokemon does. And other genres of things that do are usually like there's like less content. Like Star Wars is like, oh, there were 3 movies in a decade, then 15-20 minute years later there were other 3 movies, and 15-20 years later and then somehow Palpatine returns, right? But the point being is that Pokemon is pretty fast in how much it produces new content, and that can also make it feel like that those who are out of date are even more out of date compared to like other fandoms. So that's just like something to think about. Like the fact that Pokemon has brand new stuff every 3 to 4 years, and a lot of brand new stuff is like quite a lot. And if you like dip out of the community for a little bit, it can pose issues in my categories. And because so many people know about Pokemon, so many people have thoughts about Pokemon, and that means there might be some dumb ones, right? I would love for people to not be Gen 1ers. I would love for them to explore all the different Pokemon. But why get mad about it, right? Because it's only my own anger. I think about my friend Scott. Let me tell you about my friend Scott. He's my bowling teammate, love him to death. We were talking about Pokemon one day, and he told me his favorite Pokemon's Farfetch'd. And I was like, that's a good choice. I love Gengar, I love Dugtrio, and then I mentioned some of the more recent generations. I love Garchomp, I love Sneasler because I'm a terrible person. And he was like, those aren't Pokemon. And my first instinct was to do what you might want to do. Oh, this Gen 1 or blah, blah, blah. But I get to have a conversation with a friend and still have shared knowledge about that thing, right? If you don't know anything about sports, can you have a conversation with someone about sports? No, but you can almost talk to anyone about Pokemon. And so I wanted to yell at my friend Scott for being close minded, but I was so grateful that we can share something that we have had since our childhood, since we were literally kids. And so if you are younger and you like Pokemon, I think that's awesome. But here's the thing about nostalgia. We're always going to prefer the thing that we connected to. I'll tell you in another world, if you like basketball, I'm pretty sure who you consider the best player of all time, whether it's Michael Jordan or LeBron, is probably dependent on when you were born, right? Very similar, probably your favorite Pokemon might be related to the generation of the first game you played, no matter how old you were. And so ultimately, what I want us to do is to love each other. love the fact that we are all part of the same community. Going around yelling and calling people larpers or tourists or genwunners is just mean and often not true. Just because someone doesn't know as much about you as about something, maybe they're not an expert, but that doesn't mean they're not a fan. The only people to me who are not fans, and I'm going to be very clear in the way that I say this, if you pretend to like Pokemon to inflate Pokemon card prices for children, you are terrible and awful, and I don't quite matter what happens to you when you cross the street today. Okay, I do. I don't want anyone to die, but you're the only LARPers to me. You're the only tourists because you are here to hurt others and to take advantage of them. But if you love Pokemon for whatever reason, my wife loves shiny hunting. I love EGC. My friend Nolan loves to do radical red Nuzlocks, right? We all have our thing. And that is so cool that we can all have our thing. And I'm so grateful to be part of a community where we can all have our different little things and be like, oh, you got that, I got this. And we can cheer and be happy for each other because that's what it should be. We should all be celebrating each other's successes and not trying so hard to tear each other down. Because Pokemon is about the fact that anyone can become the Pokemon master, anyone can become the Pokemon champion. So why are we being so exclusive in a community that should be prioritizing inclusivity as much as possible? Maybe someone's a genwunner, but that doesn't mean they're a terrible person, right? And maybe someone doesn't know as much about Pokemon as you do, but that doesn't mean they're a larper or a tourist. That just means they don't know as much about Pokemon as you do. And rather than getting mad, why don't you teach them something new today? Thank you.